Okay, so let's talk a little bit about case study, or for some folks, the dreaded case study. If you find you're in a position where you're applying to jobs and you run into case studies all the time, it's something I'm going to give you some real good process and techniques that will really help you. But it's also good to continue to invest in your own education, keep diving into this area because it can get a little tricky. If you're applying for positions and you're like, what are you talking about, Steve? I'm never asked about a case study. Feel free, again, to skip past this section, though it's a very interesting section for sure. So with a case study, you might be thinking, gosh, I wish there was like a formula or a format that could help me with this. And there is. Actually, Accenture, a consulting company, put together a format. I have a link to the format here that I'll share with you, and that you can read the whole kind of document around that. Hopefully they'll leave that up online, and they don't pull that down. Because it's actually a very helpful document. But I'm going to walk through lots of these components step by step so you get a feel for that. So there is a good process that I like, and this is it from Accenture, where you've got this, like you start with listening to the case, and then you move all the way through these steps to eventually summarizing your findings. And we're going to take a moment to walk through each of these boxes individually and delve into that a little bit more and what this whole step by step means. And reminder, with a case study, a lot of times, and most times, they're not looking for a right answer. They're looking for your thought process, your critical thinking, how you might put together a recommendation, and how you would argue behind it. So understand that too. Like here's an example question you can use kind of in your own mind as we walk through this, to kind of keep in your own mind. Like, should an airline raise its fees on checked baggage? So you could use that as an anchor point, or maybe some cases you've run in the past, you can apply this method as we walk through each of the sections. But we could use the airline fee on checked baggage one for now. So the first step is listen to the case, right? You need to really listen to what the interviewer is asking. It could be something as simple as just the question, or it could be a big, long document they hand you with multiple pages that has a lot of detail. So you want to really listen to what's being said, and you really want to read if they're providing reading material, and really understand what is going on here in terms of the case. The more you understand the case, the better you'll be able to answer and give a recommendation and give your thoughts around the case. So that's very important. The next step, after listening, is to also ask questions and clarify the problem. All right, so you want to make sure you understand what the problem is and what they're asking for too. So as part of that, you might ask clarifying questions, for example, probing for additional information. What are some of the facts, the key facts there? Like for lawyers, so it's always what's all about the facts. So this is kind of like this case structure too. And just structure your thinking, take your time to think through this clarifying, summarize issues, confirming objectives, expectations, document assumptions, all sorts of different things you could do. But the main thing is to really understand it and clarify the problem, because you can't solve the problem without really truly understanding what it is. So like in the baggage claim thing, or excuse me, the baggage fee thing, you can just clarifying that you're trying to raise revenue, for example, for the company, and what are the upsides and downsides to changing prices, increasing that from a competitive standpoint and from a profitability standpoint. So you're clarifying the problem. Next, you're going to decompose the problem. I love this part. It's kind of like identifying the root causes of the problem. What's really going on here? Is the airline struggling in that one example? Are we trying to really raise revenue because we're struggling? Is there other things that we could be doing? What is the root cause of the problem? And then you can break the problem into its component parts in a structured manner. Maybe it's something that's step by step that you would be doing. But first, you're going to not only clarify the problem, you're going to really find what is the deep root causes, what are the things that are really causing us maybe to have an issue in this particular case. So you're gathering all that information, and then you're going to kind of start thinking of a hypothesis or potential solutions. At this point, it's not the solution. You're kind of thinking of ideas that are potential solutions by reviewing the decomposition of the problem. What are some different potential solutions? Stating your assumptions, like you might be assuming that if you raise prices on luggage checking, on baggage checking, that you might have less customers flying your airline and what impact that might be. And then applying a framework, if you can, is really great to test these hypotheses. And there's some things you might have learned in school, or some things that are unique to your industry that you could use for that. And here's a list of a couple of them there, but like 4 P's of marketing, right? So like if we raise our prices on baggage, for example, 4 P's of marketing would be like price, promotion, product, and like channel or place. So what if we raise our price? That's price, but How would we promote that? Would we lose market share because other people are at a lower price? You might be applying that framework of these 4 Ps. You don't have to, but it makes a nice way to do it when you're starting to state these hypotheses and how it's really from a critical thinking standpoint. If you can rely on things like that, that might be unique to your case or your industry. After you do that, you're going to test it, right? You're not going to say, that's the answer. Now it's the time to test, right? And applying that framework to test your hypothesis. Describe the analysis that you've done and how you're going to apply it. How you broke that problem into component parts in a structured manner, and what framework you're applying, or what are the findings or implications, to the solution definition that you're going to be building out. Like in that airline case, if we raise our prices 10%, how might that be different than we raise our prices 20% or 30%? So what are some of those hypotheses? What are some of the pros and cons? And you're testing that to come up with hopefully the best solution, or what you would make maybe as a final recommendation as you walk through this process. And then lastly, as you're going to summarize your findings to your interviewer, maybe it's a panel interview, and you're going to summarize the findings and the implication. You'll succinctly remind the interviewer of the issues covered. So you don't want to repeat back the entire case. They wrote the case. They know the case. You just want to hit a couple high points here where you might just say, with our particular airline that we're looking at in this case, they're really struggling with raising revenue or sales. So one way to raise profits is it might decrease actual sales, but raise profits, so we're going to charge more per bag. And we're going to analyze what is the right amount of that, and should we do it at all, right? So there you kind of succinctly did that. And then you'll present the solutions, and you say, after a deep analysis and clarifying the problem and decomposing that problem, we tried different things, but our recommendation, or my recommendation, would be X. I might say, well, I've looked at 4 different solutions. Raise prices 5%, 15%, don't raise prices at all. Or maybe the last one is we should actually cut prices and not raise prices. And you're presenting these alternative scenarios in a succinct way, and then summarizing your findings. And what I think is really strong is to make a recommendation. I recommend, based on the data of what I know so far, and based on this case, that I'd recommend this. Again, not a right or wrong answer here. They're looking at your critical thinking. And by using this process, it kind of shows some really good critical thinking, advanced critical thinking ideas behind this. With that case study process, learn more about it, really practice different things, give it a try. Think about, here's another question. Estimate the change in the price of oil 10 years from today. Will it increase or will it decrease? Again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. Who knows? Your interviewer has no idea what's going to happen with the price of oil 10 years from today, but they're looking at your critical thinking, what you think will happen, increase or decrease, and why, and what would have to be some of the things that might be in place to have an increase or decrease in terms of the price of oil. And maybe using things like supply and demand curves and all sorts of fun stuff, right? And remember, the key thing is your thought process and how you present it. How you walk the interviewer through your process, and walk them through it in a succinct way is more important than coming up with the right answer. Again, like with this oil example, obviously no right answer. Also be ready that there's a little stress that may come in as part of this. That's part of the case study process. They want to test you. They want you to be able to defend your arguments, you defend your recommendations, defend your assumptions, but I also want to see how you work under pressure. And so they want to put some stress on you, and they're doing that by intention. It's not that they don't like you. They do it to everybody. So understand there might be a little stress, maybe a lot of stress, depending on the company or the interviewer. So an interviewer may say, after you did all this wonderful presentation, at the end they may say, why did you use that assumption? That does not seem well thought out. Well, that's kind of mean, isn't it? Well, it's not mean. They're just trying to put a little stress on you. And you would then answer that question like, well, here's why I used this set of assumptions. And here's why, and then explain them, your argument behind that. And by using these assumptions, and this is how I reached my recommendation based on these assumptions and why I believe in these assumptions. That's what they're really looking for. Not for you to get argumentative with them and say, well, because that's what I chose, man. They understand there's some stress that can be part of it too. So for the section on case studies, if you do lots of case studies, as I said earlier, Practice, practice, practice. Look at that Accenture document. Look at other documents and things that are out there. Do some role plays, maybe with a friend or somebody else, and really get comfortable with the case study process. Have a process that you can apply into various different job interviews that you have, so you can draw upon that, and you'll be much more confident when you do interviews. So many times when case studies are used, people who are very smart people struggle because they lack that framework. Well, try this framework or try other frameworks. Either way, just prepare so you're able to really stand out in this case. And if you can really knock that case out of the park, well, heck, that might really help you to really make a big step towards getting an offer, which is really what we're looking for.